Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves. How's it going, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for my overview of the Superman by Kurt Busiek, Book 1 hardcover from DC Comics. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so let's go ahead and start talking about this book. And I'm going to start it a little bit different because I'm actually going to talk about where it fits into the reading order of Superman, because that is the most common question that I get asked whenever DC publishes a book like this that is creator-centric. So it really fits in between the Infinite Crisis special and the 321 action, which will probably be collected in book 2 whenever it comes out. There's also Camelot Falls, that will also be collected in volume 2, I assume. But of course, Camelot Falls has come out in a deluxe edition. As a matter of fact, I did an overview of that last year when it came out. And as you can tell, this book that we're looking at today is a standard size hardcover. And this is what your deluxe edition looks like. The deluxe editions, of course, are as tall as Omnis. Usually not as thick, but we've had some thin Omnis too. And this is, of course, the back. I'm not sure why I'm showing that, but I just wanted to make sure people were aware that this book is a standard size hardcover. It is a hardcover, but a standard size one. So it is the size of a trade paperback, and that is the paper trim size is the same. Just looks a little bit taller because it's that hardback. There we go. Now, this book, the stories in here have been previously collected before, and you're going to find those stories in these books. Superman Secret Identity, Superman Up, Up, and Away, Superman Back in Action, and half of Camelot Falls. And there's also stories in here that have never been collected by DC Comics, so we're going to be looking at that. But I did want to make people aware that these 3 main collected editions, if you've seen my reading orders, you know where they fit in, and of course, I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail when I open up the book. But these 3 are definitely all collected in here, and then half of that. The other half, I assume, will be in Volume 2. So taking a closer look at this, we have this image. It's the same image from Up, Up, and Away by Terry Dodson. The spine of the book, Superman by Kurt Busiek, Book 1. And then this looks like a job for Superman, the ISBN, and the retail price. And the retail price of this book is $49.99. Now, let's look at it underneath the dust jacket. So we do have the flaps here, Kurt Busiek, Stuart Eminem, Pete Woods, Carlos Pacheco. And then this image with pretty much the reintroduction of Superman from the story Up, Up, and Away. All right, we are going to crack this open. I'm going to tell you when it fits into the reading order of Superman exactly in a little more detail. We're going to talk about the stories collected in here and then look at the build. All right, let's go ahead and crack this book open. I love the end sheets right here. And we have our title page, Superman by Kurt Busiek, Book 1. Book 1, I love that. Probably will be a book 2. I would hope so. But here are your credits, because it's not just Kurt Busiek, it's Jeff Johns and Fabian Nicieza. And then, of course, your penciler, Stuart Eminem, Pete Woods, Renato Guedes, Carlos Pacheco, who did this piece right here, George Tuska, a young Mark Teixeira, Paul Ryan, Stuart Eminem, and Pete Woods, Renato Guedes doing some of the inks, and then the colors, Stuart Eminem, Brad Anderson, Dave Stewart, and then some of your letters, Todd Klein, Rob Lay, Nick Napolitano, and your cover artists right here, Terry and Rachel Dodson with Alex and Claire. Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Superboy created by Jerry Siegel. Supergirl based on the character created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. And that's always interesting when whenever I see the Supergirl based on the character, because it is a different character during this time. Your table of contents, you do have a wonderful introduction here by Kurt Busiek, talking about the times of Superman. I'll go into a little bit of that here in a second. And then the breakdown of each of the issues that you're going to find here. So what you're going to be seeing here is some stuff that has never been collected in collected editions before, because we are looking at a creator-centric book. and where you're going to find each of these issues, when it was originally published, and where it came from, and then who the cover artist was. I love the breakdown that DC does with most of their table of contents. My Adventures with Superman, talking about his journey writing comics with Superman that started all the way back in 1982. And it's really interesting to see how long Kurt Busiek has been writing comics. I mean, this is Kurt Busiek, the same guy that gave us Marvels, and of course the Thunderbolts, had an awesome run on JLA, and then had an awesome run on Superman, and oh my gosh, Astro City, and the amazing Aerosmith, which I know I've talked about on my channel before, where he worked with Carlos Pacheco. So we are kicking it off with World's Finest Comics 308. So this collects World's Finest Comics 308 and 309, Action Comics 837 to 843, and Superman 650 to 658, Superman The Man of Steel Annual Number 5, and Superman Secret Identity 1 through 4. This book has 664 pages and retails for $49.99. Now, the early stories here are pretty interesting. You have George Tuska doing this particular story where Superman and Batman are trying to solve the same case just from different cities, and they have an interaction here, just like they would in a World's Finest book. This is the character of Quantum. This is an early and young Mark Teixeira with inks by Alfredo Alcala. I'm familiar with him from his work on Conan the Barbarian. But this is the first time I've read these issues right here of World's Finest. And it's interesting to see Kurt Busiek, a young Kurt Busiek, writing these particular stories. He had written a Justice League story prior to this, and he had written another couple of Justice League stories, but they aren't really focused on Superman. DC wanted to just collect stories in here based on Superman. Okay, and then we get this part of the Dead Earth series. This is Superman Man of Steel Annual Number 5, I believe. Yeah, 5. And this is, it doesn't give you a forward or anything as to what exactly is going on in this story. I guess if I was reading this collection, I might be a little bit confused. But just so you're not, there was this whole event that was known as the Dead Earth event through a bunch of the DC annuals. And that all happened in the year 1996. So what this is pretty much saying all of Earth's heroes are gone. And then these earthly legends will live on through the universe. So it doesn't have to just take place on Earth. And this particular story is the story of Superman, the Man of Steel. But this guy's known as Caleb. And Caleb is the last son of Hydros. That's pretty much his planet instead of Krypton. And this is all about how he ends up leading this rebellion against an empire. Again, it's like an Elseworld. No, it is an Elseworld tale. But I just want people to know in case there was a little bit of a confusion as to what exactly this story is. And then we fast forward a few years. And we're looking at this story called Superman Secret Identity. And when you read the foreword, I didn't know about this, that he wanted to make this story about the character that appears in Crisis on Infinite Earths, that particular Superman from Earth Prime. But he didn't think DC would go for it. So instead, he kind of tweaked the story a little bit that he wanted to tell. And man, this is one of my favorite Superman stories. This has been collected in several formats. I have shown the deluxe edition here. This one, I think, was reprinted. Man, time. This one has been reprinted a few times, if you're interested in picking that up. But it's also part of this. Now, this is another story much like the annual that takes place not on this Earth, because this is the story of a world without superheroes. And this is the story of a young man named Clark Kent. That's the name that his parents gave him. And of course, other kids in school pick on him because his name is Clark Kent, the same name as the guy in the comics, Superman. He also happens to not been the biggest Superman fan because of getting picked on. So Clark ends up growing up and he finds out that he has Superman-like powers like the guy in the comic book. Now he tries to hide it from other people, but in this story, you'll see him grow older and older and learn to own it. And it's a really cool take on Superman. Later on, Kurt Busiek and the late Jean-Paul Leon did a similar story with Batman. So it's pretty much what would happen if Superman was real and had existed in our world. And I find that story to be so interesting. Like, I know it's been done hundreds of times, I'm sure. But it never gets old to me. I think it's really cool. And there's a couple of twists and turns where the story goes, because you figure most people that end up with power are like, oh yeah, I'm going to use it for good right away. Yeah, he tries to hide it because he's just tired of getting picked on. I do have to also state that this Stuart Eminem is a lot different than the Stuart Eminem that you're going to see in the pages of Next Wave. Even in Final Night, it looks different. It looks a lot different than the pages of Ultimate Spider-Man or his New Avengers. That seems to be a little more poppy. Over here, it's a little more of his sketchy art style, and it looks so good. I really dig this particular story. If you haven't had a chance to read it, out of the entire book, I think this is one of the best Superman stories. But again, taken out of continuity. So let's look at... I love the fact that Secret Identity also starts with a classic page right there, a throwback page. Let's fast forward some time to 2006. Crazy that we started with stories from 1982, moving on to 1996, moving on to the early aughts, and now we're at 2006. When he was offered the chance to write Superman ongoing. This particular story is known as Up, Up, and Away. And it is co-written by Jeff Johns, who was writing the Action Comics at the time. And along with Richard Donner. I love that. And what's important to note in this particular story is that this takes place after Infinite Crisis. I'm not going to go into detail how it happens, but I do have to talk about, so just minor spoilers for Infinite Crisis. Because if you haven't read it and you're reading this, you might be asking yourself, wait a second, how's this happening? Okay, so the spoiler is, and it's a minor spoiler, that Superman, Clark Kent, ends up losing his powers at the end of Infinite Crisis. So DC decided to have this event where they're going to time jump. So there's a little bit of a time lapse between the previous issue and this issue of Superman. And they jumped ahead a year. So Superman hasn't been around for a year now. The world thinks he's dead, and he's completely depowered. And you can find out how he got depowered by reading Infinite Crisis. So this kicks off 1 year later, where he is completely depowered, and you're focusing on other superheroes that are trying to help out, and also what Lex Luthor has been up to. Because of the events of Infinite Crisis, he's not really looked upon as a hero during this particular time. So he ends up toying around with this crystal. It's called the Sunstone. And the Sunstone was given to him, he took it rather, during the events of Infinite Crisis. And it's interesting what this Sunstone can do. Very similar to perhaps one of the movies that you may have seen. Now, of course, we're talking about Superman, and of course, we're talking about Clark Kent. So it is interesting to see how some of the heroes want him back. I found this part to be awesome, where Green Lantern offers him a ring and is like, "Hey, we need you back, buddy. We can't be doing this by ourselves." I thought this part was awesome, and he does try to wear the ring and try to become a hero that way, but of course, it's Superman. It doesn't work because he thinks differently. So little by little, his powers do get restored, of course. The story mainly focuses on him getting that restoration of his powers, and then bringing back some classic villains. And what I mean by classics, I'm not just talking about Lex Luthor or Metallo, but also like the Toy Man, the Prankster, the Kryptonite Man, and other characters that appeared mainly in the Man of Steel series that John Byrne wrote, and then a little bit after that, like the Silver Banshee and Livewire, Bloodsport. Oh, what is the guy's name? Helgramite? That's it. The Helgramite guy. So that's what this story is. It is the return of Clark Kent to this role of Superman. Then after that, we get another story following that Up, Up, and Away, immediately following Up, Up, and Away, by the way, because there were some delays as people were collecting these comics back then know, in the Richard Donner and Jeff Johns and Adam Kubert story, Last Son, there was a family illness. So it wasn't like people were being lazy. Something legit happened. So this one is co-written by Fabian Nicieza, which are really good friends. They've known each other for a long time. Who wrote the plot? Pete Woods doing the artwork. And that's one thing I did not note, by the way, is this, here, let's go back, amazing back and forth between Pete Woods and Renato Guedes in Action Comics and in Superman. I thought that was really cool that all of it, of course, is put together by the colors, but I just thought it was really cool to go back and forth, almost feeling like the same kind of artist. So what I meant to say earlier is that there is another story that follows up immediately after the Up, and Away, and that is Back in Action, co-written by Fabian Nicieza. And this is pretty much after Superman gets his powers back. The world kind of refuses to believe that this is the real Superman. And not just the world, but some superheroes are like, yeah, I don't know about this guy. We don't know if this is the real deal or not. So some superheroes do choose to believe him. You have the Teen Titans that guest star in this. You have Nightwing. You have Firestorm. I love seeing Firestorm post Infinite Crisis. Mr. Terrific. Some of them choose to believe that it is Superman. Others don't. And this is the battle against the Auctioneer, who is a new character for this particular story. And the story is only 3 issues long. Oh, and then we get to Camelot Falls, which... oh, I love this story so much. I know I've done an overview of the deluxe edition. And by the way, even if you purchase this, the deluxe edition is absolutely stunning just for this wonderful, wonderful artwork. It's also printed in this thicker, glossy paper stock, which I'll talk about the paper stock here in a little bit. So this story, if you want to go into a deeper dive, I've done an overview of it. This is just half of the story. The other half, I assume, will be in the next volume. So this, again, is Kurt Busiek teaming up with Carlos Pacheco. And it shows Superman just battling the inner gang. And who is it? Neutron, I think. Or Newton. That's what his name is. And eventually what ends up happening is that Arion, a character from DC Comics, shows up with a warning. And Arion ends up telling Superman of this post-apocalyptic future that he's seen. And the post-apocalyptic future is where this character named Kyber rules. And the reason this post-apocalyptic future has happened is because of superheroes. It's because in present day, we have the fall of civilization, all due to heroes. And this has to be prevented in some kind of way. And it makes for a really interesting story. I love the design of this character, by the way. It does make for a really interesting story that makes you question, wait a second, if superheroes are bad, then how can a superhero stop things from happening if it's meant to be? So, it's so awesome. I love this story, and I'm glad they're collecting it in here. And like I said, this is just half. The other half will be in the second book. Then we have the extras. We have sketches and the pitch right here. This is the original idea for Secret Identity. I think it was Superman: A Life in Secret was the original idea. This is the pitch for Up, and Away with Jeff Johns, of course, talking about the breakdown of not just the issues, but also the breakdown of the characters. I love seeing things like that behind the scenes to get like a better understanding of, where they were at the time. And then your end sheets here. I said I was a fan of already. All right, let's look at the binding and build. 664 pages, a lot of excess glue, but it is its own binding. Again, this is a standard size book, though, not the size of the deluxe edition, which I have done a quick little compare. I love seeing the Ray. Have done a quick little comparison with the deluxe edition of Camelot Falls. So let's just really quick, one more time in case you missed it, look at the differences in the size of the art right there. And of course, the different paper stock. This printed in glossy paper. This is printed in this matte, almost, yeah, this feels like matte. maybe satin paper. It's not really semi-gloss, but more like a satin. Like they've been doing for their latest deluxe editions. But that's it. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this hardcover, don't forget to check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this book. And of course, what it collected in it and where it fits into the reading order of Superman. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. Everyone stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.